Good afternoon. I would now like to call to order our meeting today for the Allegheny County Board of Education, Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 at 5:08 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, Mr. Llewellyn will read closed session summaries for executive sessions held on September 13th, 2022.
The Allegheny County Board of Education met in closed session on September 13th, 2022 at 4:00 p.m. at Central Office. The purpose of the closed session was to consult with legal counsel, discuss personnel matters, and to engage in administrative function. All 5 members of the board were present. The statutory authority to close the session is found under General Provisions Article Section 3305B 1 and 7. And the topics discussed were termination of a non-certificated employee, criminal action against a trespasser, and superintendent evaluation.
Thank you, Mr. Llewellyn. We have an amendment that needs made to the agenda. At this time, can I have a motion under new business for approval for the bid for the Fort Hill HVAC system and a budget amendment along with that?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Frank, second by Mr. Farrell. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Can I also have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Bond,
Second.
second by Mr. Farrell. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. First, under our superintendent's report, we will have just Mr. Sean Ferdiska then, not Ms. Deb Matheny. Okay, Mr. Ferdiska, an update on Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee.
Good evening. The mission of the Allegheny County Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee is to provide information to develop knowledge, attitudes, and skills needed by families, educators, other professionals, and community members to enable individuals with disabilities to have the maximum opportunity to become fully participating members of their home, school, work, and community. The vision of the Allegheny County Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee is to facilitate communication and collaboration between families, educators, administrators, and community leaders to enhance services available for students with disabilities and advocate for positive changes in special education services within Allegheny County Public School System. Members of this committee must live or work in Allegheny County and can include parents or guardians of students with special needs and requirements, persons with special knowledge or interests concerning special education, students with special education needs and requirements, local special education support or advocacy groups, teachers, staff, administrators with interest in special education. The committee meets virtually each quarter on the second Monday of the month of September, December, March, and June. Tentative dates for the remainder of the school year are December 12th, 2022, March 13th, 2023, and June 12th, 2023. Additional information on the committee and current bylaws are available online. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferdiska. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Fraley will now present a proclamation recognizing School Bus Safety Week.
Do it here. Okay. Allegheny County Board of Education proclamation. Whereas Maryland students, transportation administrators, and operators remain diligent and committed to ensuring the safe transportation of nearly 700,000 students on a daily basis, and their efforts are critical to the operation and safety of our schools. And whereas all school bus drivers and attendants employed or contracted by local education agencies must achieve rigorous and specialized training as well as adhere to the highest standards of school bus safety. And whereas during the school year, these fleets cover millions of miles, operate in a variety of weather conditions, and have an outstanding safety record despite the ever-present challenges that they face. And whereas Maryland is pleased to join the nation in recognizing National School Bus Safety Week in all of our counties and recognize the school bus drivers and attendants who connect our children to their school communities and keep Maryland students safe every day. And now, therefore, we, the Board of Education of Allegany County, express our deep appreciation to these valuable employees and commends their work on behalf of the children, and do hereby proclaim October 17th to the 21st of 2022 School Bus Safety Week. In witness hereof, signed by Crystal Bender, President, and Jeff Blank, Superintendent of Schools. And this is presented to Mr. Homer Martz, or HB, this new Supervisor of Transportation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Fraley. Ms. Bender, members of the board, we appreciate the opportunity to be able to serve you every day. Our number one mission is transporting all of our students safely and efficiently, and we relish that we get to do that for you every day. We've been working hard since the beginning of the year. We presented our Bus for the Bus program ahead of Bus Safety Week, School Bus Safety Week. We've touched all 17 of the elementary schools plus the Early Learning Center, and by the end of next week, we will have educated over 900 pre-K and kindergartners. So we hope that that's going to help promote safety just a little bit for our new riders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Martz. We have a middle school outdoor school update from Eric Van Slyke.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Llewellyn, Mr. Blank. Thank you for inviting me tonight to give you a little update on our environmental literacy. I run the secondary outdoor school and environmental literacy plan. So I'm giving you a little update on what we've been able to accomplish this year. We're happy to be able to get back to in-person programming. So we were able to get all of our sixth graders to a one-day experience at Evergreen. Let's look at the zoom in so we can move that way. At the Evergreen Heritage Center. Seventh grade, we do the outdoor school program. It's a commuter program. The students go out to Rocky Gap for 2 days. Alice Ferguson Foundation from Hvac, Maryland comes up and does programming with our students. And then they go to the schools on Friday and do a half-day program with them as well. As well as the eighth grade students do a field trip to Evergreen Heritage Center. So that's our middle school programs. In the high school, oops, clicking the wrong button here. Where am I going? In the high school, our earth science students, typically our ninth grade students, are doing a one-day trip to Evergreen as well. We also have the AP Environmental Science students. Some of the classes go to Rocky Gap, and Alice Ferguson Foundation does some field trips with them. And we've also added chemistry and matter and energy field trips. Now that's an in-school field trip, so the students don't go anywhere. The Evergreen Heritage Center comes to our schools and does 2 days of programming with them during their class periods in the school. In addition, we have the Envirothon that's eligible to any student that wishes to join a team in any of the 4 schools. We also open it up to the non-publics. Last year we had BW join with 2 teams. First time in a couple of years they've been able to do that. So the students compete in aquatics, soils, forestry, wildlife, and what's called the 5th issue. And that changes every year. Last year, Allegany High School, one of their teams took first and actually went to the states and took 4th in the state. So it's the first time that we placed that high in a while at the state level. And some of the schools downstate have this as a class in their curriculum. So it's they did a pretty good job for being that level at the state level. And most of these students are back. There weren't very many seniors in that team. So it'll be interesting to see how they do this year as well. So this chart just gives you a little highlight of how many students are involved in the program. So in 6th grade, we had 587 students participate. 7th grade, 624. 8th grade, 597. Earth Science, 486 Earth Science students, 564 Matter and Energy. And we usually have 9 or 10 teams, which is about 45 to 50 students in the Envirothon in high school. So over 2,900 students total participate in our environmental literacy in 6 to 12. Our outdoor school is finishing up in elementary today, so I think Mr. McGowan's going to present that at a different meeting. But so we're happy to be back in person. I also want to report that all of our secondary schools, our middle schools and high schools are all green schools. We were able to achieve that a couple years ago. And all of our middle schools are currently recertifying as green schools this year. So, any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate how nice it is that our students, we're doing everything we were doing before and seeing the numbers that our students actually get to go out and do hands-on at different places, and being fortunate enough to see the students in action. I think that's all it takes. Once you see that, you realize how much we missed that. So thank you for your leadership in this program.
Sure. We thank transportation, of course, because they're busing the kids out there. Subs are an issue as well, and we're able to get those as well. So it's it's definitely a community making it happen, and it's really Mr. Blank was able to go out to an outdoor school and see the kids in the creek. So they're out there pulling macroinvertebrates out of the creeks. Pretty neat experience. So. The elementary one, I can say, I attest a couple years ago, I went with my son. It's an amazing program too, the residential camp in Garrett County. So that one's good. Mr. McGowan will talk about that one later, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Slyke. And now we have a blueprint update from Dr. Main.
Thank you for having me back. Mr. Blank asked me to come tonight just to give just a brief reminder of the history of Blueprint, and then also kind of a status of where we're at. Ryan, are you messing with me? Thank you. So just as a brief review again, the Maryland Commission on the Innovative for Excellence in Education started in 2016 and was led by Dr. William Kerwin in the state of Maryland. His team did meet together, did some extensive research, and that research has become the basis for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future as we know it now. The commission issued both an interim and a final report. Understanding that work is really critical to understanding the blueprint legislation. So I have linked both an overview and the interim report on this slide if anybody is interested in seeing that. After the commission concluded their work, House Bill 1300 was introduced during the 2020 legislative session. The Maryland General Assembly approved the legislation, however, the governor vetoed it. So it came back through during the 2021 legislative session. The General Assembly again overrode the governor's veto, and House Bill 13 passed and became law. At the same time, a sister legislation came into effect. It was House Bill 1372, and that really addressed the timelines of the earlier bill because we were already behind. Because there was a significant delay in appointing many of the pieces of the blueprint, House Bill 1450 was passed in the spring of 2022 to extend those deadlines, and that's really the piece of legislation that we're working on right now. The major goals of the blueprint is there are two: to transform Maryland's early childhood, primary, and secondary education system to levels of high-performing systems around the world, and also to establish a career ladder system for educators composed of levels through which teachers may progress and gain certain authority, status, and compensation as they gain certain expertise. So those are the two overriding goals. We'll look at this quickly, and I know that print's very, very small, but there are 5 pillars to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. The first pillar is early childhood education. I've listed some of the major milestones in the legislation for Pillar 1. That includes significantly expanding publicly funded full-day pre-K for all 4-year-olds and low-income 3-year-olds through a public and private delivery system. Increase the number of high-quality early education providers and educators. expand supports for young children and their families, to fully fund the Maryland Infant and Toddlers Program, and to improve student readiness for kindergarten. So our system has done a lot of work in those areas. The second pillar is high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. The purpose of this pillar is to increase rigor of educator licensure and prep programs, to improve educator compensation and working conditions, to institute new recruitment and professional development efforts to create a more diverse educator workforce, to establish new statewide educator career ladders to continually improve the professional practice and student performance, and to implement a more comprehensive in-service educator training and professional development. The third pillar is college and career readiness. The major milestones of this pillar is to implement pre-K through 12 curriculum for students to be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade, to develop an aligned instructional system with resources and supports that are necessary to keep students on track, provide students with resources necessary to achieve reading proficiency by the end of 3rd grade, create a statewide framework for rigorous CTE programs and skill standards, and to establish pathways for CCR and non-CCR students in grades 11 and 12. Pillar 4 is more resources for students to be successful. Included in this pillar are to provide more supports for students in schools who need it most, specifically additional supports for English learners, low income, and special education students, to provide new concentration of poverty grants directly to eligible schools, to support community schools and enhance wraparound services, and to coordinate community supports to meet student behavioral health needs and provide technical assistance to schools. The last pillar is Pillar 5. That's the governance and accountability pillar. The purpose of this pillar is to establish the Accountability and Implementation Board, and they oversee and monitor state and local agencies' progress, to develop state and local blueprint implementation plans, and to create expert review teams to visit all schools and make recommendations for improving student achievement. So that's a brief summary of the 5 pillars of the blueprint. Both the AIB and the MSDE have published resources to help counties, to help LEAs develop and implement their plan, 2 of which are shown here. You can access those resources with the following links. MSDE has a website that has been expanded to include many, many resources, as does the AIB. The proposed information flow chart, information does flow into both Mr. Blank and myself. That information is disseminated to the senior staff and the Blueprint Committee chairs, and from there we disseminate to instructional supervisors, administrative staff. We do have a website, a page on our website that's really under development, and also the stakeholders in our community. The next steps for our system is to form the Blueprint Implementation Plan team. That is comprised of the superintendent, the Blueprint coordinator, district-level leaders, teachers, and administrators, and their job is to provide oversight for the development and implementation of the Blueprint plan. We will continue to meet with Blueprint Committee chairs to disseminate information supporting each pillar. The Blueprint Committee members will review the Blueprint implementation planning materials that have not been released yet but are to be released soon. And we will participate in introductory sessions and information sessions and workshops and collaborative sessions by each pillar as they are made available by both MSDE and the AIB. We'll engage community stakeholders to gather feedback regarding the Blueprint plan. We will develop a draft Blueprint plan based on the final publication of the template in early December, and then finally we'll submit the the ACPS final blueprint implementation plan on or before March 15th when it's due. Locally, our blueprint committee chairs are as follows. Pillar 1 for early childhood is Mrs. Jackie Enright. Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, Mr. Steve Wilson. Pillar 3, college and career readiness is Dr. Kim Caldwell. Pillar 4, more resources for students to be successful, Mrs. Debbie Matheny. And Pillar 5 is myself. I will chair that pillar. There are 2 timelines that are listed. The first are deliverables to both the AIB and the MSDE. I won't go down each and every one of those, but it's important to know that as a system, we have met each of our reports in a timely manner. Everything is in that we need to have in, and we continue working on the reports that are being asked for. It is kind of a moving target, so it's a work in progress. The future blueprint implementation date timeline, the AIB will publish a draft template the 15th of this month. They will put that out for public review. On the 1st of December, we should receive a final plan template that we can start working on. We will continue to work through the spring then on the final plan, which is due in March, on March 15th. And then finally, just the implementation team will continue to provide regular updates and meet with the appropriate community stakeholders as appropriate. So that is the update at this point. We will, again, anytime we get information, we'll continue to update our stakeholders and our school folks. So.
Are there any questions for Dr. Main? Okay, thank you. Thank you for putting that all together for us. We appreciate it. Okay, next we have a testing and accountability update from Mrs. Trina Simpson.
It's been a while since I've been able to present in front of you all, so it's nice to be here. For those that aren't overall familiar, I supervise assessments, accountability, and now communications. And in the assessments area, take all of the data and analyze, crunch it, try to work with all of the administrators across all of the schools to develop where their strengths are and where their needs are, and then come up with what the root cause might be, what our implementation of plan is going to be. But since we've not had a lot of formal assessments or results to work off of, we're waiting on those right now. The spring assessments will be delivered to us in score mode by the end of the calendar year. So by the beginning of January, I'll be able to start working with. It seems like the school year is half over, but we know from year to year a lot of the needs are the same. So we wouldn't wait until the next year to start working on them. We'll go ahead and jump in and start to work as soon as we have results. I do want to give you a few updates as far as new things that we've not heard of before. Beginning in the 21-22 school year, the MSDE now tracks students at the 9th grade level. This is at the end of their 9th grade level, including summer programs, that are on track to graduate in 4 years. This data component's reported to the MSDE and included in the annual high school data collection. That's all part of our Maryland School Report Card that we see online as well. ACPS reported 88.9. That was 531 out of 597 students at the end of their 9th grade year on track for graduation. Low and a bit, raise your eyebrows a little bit. So what this number does is it enables us to, instead of just offering programs to everyone that's struggling, really dig in and make contact with parents to let them know that their child already at the end of 9th grade is not on track for graduating on time. So the MSDE is in the works, and probably within a year or two will have their own components of what makes them on track to graduate on time. In the meantime, they wanted to report it. They left it in the hands of the county. We met as a system, and we felt that to graduate is really your credits. It's the checklist of your diploma. Which is often influenced by discipline and attendance, but those things are indirectly, so we didn't include them in our report. We definitely just pulled out students that had at least 6 credits by the end of their summer. That could include their credit recovery. So if they had 6 credits, we came up with 6 because if they only had 5 4s, they're gonna fall short, and so we came up with the 6. That's where we pulled our data. And we had 66 students that are not on track already at the end of their 9th grade. And those parents, the students, they've been contacted, they've been encouraged to go ahead and participate in the after-school recovery. A lot of times when the students or the parents hear those words, you're not on track to graduate. I mean, saying it like that is different than just you have failed a class or 2. And so they have been contacted. A lot of them are currently in credit recovery. And most of the students, though, that are not on track to graduate also fall in our habitually absent category, which makes it very difficult, frustrating for the schools they want so badly to educate them, and we can only do while they're there. In saying that, we even had a lot of students that did register, or the parents said, oh yes, and we register, and then we hire teachers for after school to work with them, and the attendance for session 1 of after school has been less than 50% that registered are actually attending. But this is something that you'll see and you'll hear of now, this on track for graduation. So I wanted you to be aware of where that comes from. We do pull out the students and do not include those that are certificate bound, since they're not on track for a diploma. That would be like our students in special ed that are geared towards a certificate. So spinning off of that and talking a little bit about credit recovery, we know that we had a lot more students fail, a higher increase in Fs with the pandemic, and then with getting back, it has started to decrease, but the students do have that gap in knowledge. I wanted to let you know we do have 3 after-school sessions at all 3 high schools, as well as summer school, in order for them to recover credits. There's no limit of credits that they can recover because it's not about attendance, it's about an amount of knowledge. And so that was kind of a shift that we made in the schools, that it's not about coming and serving seat time. So what we did is I worked with the supervisors and came up with the units that if students would achieve at least a 60% in these units, we feel we can, that they have earned their credit. Once they get to that point, they can continue to earn a higher grade if they want. We have a lot of students in summer school and after school that earn A's and B's at that point. It's just like something maybe clicked, or smaller setting, that one-on-one, getting back with the teacher and the direct instruction. So anyway, it's consistent through all 3 sessions as well as summer school. The students have 20 days, 2 hours per day to show a competency of at least 60%. It is expected, though, that students that failed have gained some of course knowledge that would be used as a baseline to recovery. Therefore, we've come up with eligibility requirements in credit recovery. Students that have failed at a 50% are enrolled in just a standard credit recovery. We went ahead knowing that there is a hardship and a deficit right now to regain. We lowered that down to a 40%, that we now allow students down to a 40% to also recover credits. That used to be a 50 pre-COVID, and so with that, they have an extended amount of work. It may be like an extra unit or 2 in after school. Still very doable in the time period that we offer for them. And then a knowledge base of less than 40% in a course would need to be retaken. We have had a few parents that were concerned about that less than 40%, like maybe all of the grades were less than 40, and now where does that put my child? And some have thought, maybe the student just didn't show on paper that they had 40%, but if we're gearing it off of knowledge that they felt their child did have 40% of a knowledge base. And so we said we were definitely open to optional pathways. We have created that they can take like an end of course exam to show where their knowledge base is. We will also use, when we get back at the end of the year, the MCAP scores. And if they did not meet proficiency, but they were just the level before as far as approaching proficiency, we still will allow them to recover that credit. Because as I said, it's about the knowledge, not about time, or maybe they just shut down and didn't turn any of the work in. We want to make as many pathways as we can for students. At the same point, there has to be a standard that we hold to, and we can't just continue to lower standards. I love the saying that we're getting everything back to normal, and that normal is we used to have a very high standard that we held everyone to, and I like that we're getting back to that. For session 1, we do have 70 students registered in after-school credit recovery. Our guidance counselors, along with administrators, supervisors, myself, have worked very hard just reaching out to students and parents to get that many students registered. So moving on from the credit recovery into college and career readiness, I will speak just a little more about Pillar 3 that Dr. Main, yes, she's still here, spoke to in the blueprint. And the MSDA indicates if students are college and career ready, students should be assessed in English and math by the end of grade 10. I'll pause there for a moment and say, we've always reported CCR. That phrase isn't new, but the revamping and into the blueprints and some of the work that goes into it is new. That's what I'll get into. Students meeting CCR, and I'll tell you how they actually are deemed CCR in just a minute, they will have access to 3 distinct pathways to complete post-CCR requirements. Pathways include competitive entry college prep programs, early college and dual enrollment programs, and career and technical education programs. Kind of sounds like a lot of what Allegheny County is already doing, right? That's what I thought. And so I was glad to know that we are on the right path. Counties will receive, right now, the number is, if it changes by the time it comes out, it's supposed to be $517 per student that meets CCR in both English and math. The money is intended to pay for or supplement the post-pathway expenses that would come from the student being CCR. CCR status, though, is more than just a post indicator. It's also an indicator that creates a plan and a pathway of readiness for students not meeting CCR. As Dr. Main said, it is initiated clear down at the elementary level. And so it's really creating this pathway so that by the time they're at the end of their 10th grade year, we know which pathway they're going to be going in as far as that readiness. Well, what deems them CCR, you ask? That gets tricky because the scores have changed so greatly. Basically, it's if they were proficient on their English and then if they were proficient on their math. The reason I say it gets tricky is because those scores have changed from year to year. Pre-COVID, there were 5 levels of proficiency. Levels 4 and 5 were deemed proficient. Then COVID hit, we didn't test a year, then we had delayed testing, and because of the delayed testing, it was a shortened version of a test. Because it was a shortened version, they didn't feel it was easily to break out all 5 levels. They went to 3 levels. That was the fall 2021. Because there were only 3 levels, students are deemed proficient if they had a level 2 or 3. Then we took spring 2022, which we don't have the scores back for, but when they do come back, we've changed it yet again. And now we're going to have 4 levels, with level 3 and 4 being proficient. So it really depends on which year the student took an assessment. And that is a lot of looking at data. But when the students meet in both math and English, they're then deemed CCR. If they're not CCR in math or English, the next year we retest them. We do retest them now. We met, as far as English is concerned, they would retake the English 10, but as far as their math is concerned, we found that it would be better for them to assess the current content that they're in. So if they're in geometry, if they're in Algebra 2, that's what they would assess. That gives them another opportunity at a different grade level to become CCR. Test result updates, English and math results are not set to be available by the end of the calendar year. As I said, pre-COVID, ACPS was above state average in 14 of 17 tested areas. I think that truly shows what we're capable of and what we will get back to. Early fall 2021 results had us below the state average in 16 of 17 tested areas. These results are consistent with other counties across the state with high poverty and special needs. We know these two student groups specifically are impacted at a higher level during the pandemic, showing that in-person learning, it makes a tremendous difference. Schools continue to focus on opportunities to regain the loss of learning that occurred during that time. The opportunities include tutoring, summer schools, small groups, remediation programs, and others. Which leads me to my last few comments as far as school improvement plans. Though there have been no formal school improvement plans with each individual school for the past 2 years, it doesn't mean that schools have not been working towards their improvements. Content diagnostics have been given to students to determine areas of strengths and areas that need additional focus. School improvement plans will resume this school year, including spring 2022 results once they're obtained. I'll continue to analyze data and suggest improvements accordingly once the data is received. I know that was a lot. So, any questions?
So, just so I'm clear, so we have somebody that's going to take recovery credits. That means they failed their class or they weren't there enough, whatever. So they go to these 20 hours, 20 days, 2 hours a day, and they only need 40% to be declared that they've achieved a level of competency?
No, maybe I wasn't clear on that. First of all, it is based on their final grade on their transcript. They've had to fail. Their attendance isn't taken into consideration during that. If they failed with a final grade of at least 40, they're given the opportunity to recover the credit. They then need to work from a 40. They need to get up to 60% to earn the credit.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions, Ms. Frank?
Thank you for putting all of this together. It's a lot.
I know. I'm sorry.
Just a couple questions about career or college and career ready, math in particular.
Yes.
Suppose you have a student in 11th grade or 12th grade even who ends up taking an early college class in algebra and passes it. However, their score is poor on the PARC or any of the other assessments that we currently do. How is that managed? Because that's one of your indicators, that they score 4 or 5 on PARC, 2 or 3 on MCAP and all of that.
It's an excellent question. It's actually one that we have asked the MSDE, and they are exploring the other opportunities that will make the students CCR. At this point, that's all that they're saying. They are actually looking at some other ways. For instance, in the past, they allowed us to have our local agreement as part of marking the student CCR, where if they had a 3.0 unweighted GPA, they were deemed CCR. I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to address this comment. They won't be if they have a 3.0 unweighted GPA, they won't be deemed right now CCR by the state, but we still have an agreement with Alleghany College that we're allowing students to take those college-bearing credits. So it's not keeping the student from doing so at this point, unless the state tells us that we're not going to be able to do that. It was very disturbing because the way it was presented is that a student had to be CCR in order to take the CTE pathway. And we said that would strip them, like a great majority of our students, from that opportunity. And what they're looking at is studies to show students that weren't CCR and took this based on like a GPA or something else, were they successful? So it's kind of taking some time to get that, that data gathered and then analyzed. I look for there to be additional things added. In the past, you know, we had lots of pathways. We took SATs, ACTs, GPAs, PARC, AP scores, and they've really just stripped it down right now to MCAP. But I look for it to be expanded. All I can do is present what it is currently.
Okay, that would make sense. And the other question, maybe it's a rhetorical question.
It's okay.
And one without a solution. But in looking at the ninth graders and whether they were on track for graduation and so on, and we had 88.9% on track. And you mentioned that those who weren't, that most of them, I would assume, are absentee problems or attendance problems.
A good many of them, yes.
And I guess I'm thinking, are we doing something at the middle school level to keep this from progressing? You know, it would seem to me they don't just wake up one day in ninth grade and they stop coming. This has probably been an issue through middle school, if not elementary. So
Kindergarten.
So it probably is a rhetorical question, because any school system is going to have that percentage of disengaged parents and you know, folks not supporting these kids. But you know, we'll never get close to 100% unless we do some really creative, proactive stuff in middle school to get them on that path. Are you aware of anything we're doing in the 8th grade level?
Well, a few years ago, I started working with some of them in the Title I office and presented the Attendance Works. It's a website, and I know that Dr. Caldwell has expanded that this year, looked into some of their programs that are actual that you purchase, and it expands the opportunities and really gears in toward your specific area. It's not just a general, because we know it's different from area to area as far as why students aren't here. But we definitely know that, and the schools have become very creative in trying to make connections with the parents. We have found that it's the connection piece and making it personable that really gets the buy-in from the parents. And you're right that if you don't get them by the time they're at middle school, it's really hard. The parents, sometimes it's really hard for them to change a habit, which, you know, so we are working. We know that the attendance, as I said in the slide, we can only educate them when they're here.
One final comment. That makes, I think, adding social workers and more mental health counselors to our system in the last couple of years even more relevant. And in a perfect world, we'll see those numbers, the absentee numbers, drop as those connections get established.
Yes.
So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your questions.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Simpson? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, moving on to unfinished business, we have one policy for second reading, and Mr. Llewellyn will take it from here.
You have before you the volunteers policy. It's file IJOC. The purpose. This is a new policy, and the purpose is to provide appropriate background checks on certain volunteers. We've given definitions of a school-based volunteer and chaperones, and defined in the policy statement what type of background checks do they need to have. This is second reading, so if it's passed tonight, it will become policy.
Motion to approve policy IJOC for second reading.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Fraley, second by Mr. Farrell. Any questions for Mr. Llewellyn? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. At this time, we'll move into hearing of constituents. It is reminded to those speaking, please keep comments to 5 minutes, and topics excluded from comment are individual personal issues, anything identifying students or staff members, matters that may be on appeal, topics for which the board schedules formal public hearings or advertising or solicitation of products. And we have a Mr. Zachary Barb signed up to speak.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll be honest with you, when I got in the car, I was angry. I spoke with Mr. Martz. I believe he said he's new. Was he not around last year? So this may actually be a problem that you inherited. My issue is with a bus driver that I've had now for a little over a year. I started with my son last year. There was an issue with gum. Apparently she had, spoke to them about him. I was fine with that. I did want my kids disciplined. I get that. Then came to a point where he comes home one day with a handful of chewed gum. And I'm like, what is this? He's like, well, she made us clean the underneath the bus seats. I said, okay, did you get gloves? Was there a trash can on the bus? Well, she said we weren't allowed to use that since we put it there. So again, my son from school in Westmar had to carry, in a time when we couldn't even breathe near each other, had to carry chewed gum home in his hand and throw it away. I wasn't home for that. His mother was there. I don't know, it wasn't a whole lot, 3 or 4 pieces, but still not the point. So we called the bus garage. I spoke with a male, I'm not sure who it was at the time, and he said, okay, I will talk to him. Well, about a week and a half later, I guess they called back, yeah, we spoke to her, this is what's going to happen. I said, okay, we let it go. Then she gets into my son's face again and says, if you think I've been a...
Mr. Barb.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Taking guidance from our attorney, we actually need to probably interrupt you. This is more of a personal issue that we would refer directly to the superintendent and the head of transportation.
Let's go.
Okay, moving on to new business. We added in for the bid for the Fort Hill HVAC system and also the budget amendment to go along with that, Mr. Marley and Mr. McKenzie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here this evening with a recommendation to accept a bid that we recently received. This will be for the Fort Hill boiler and HVAC replacement project. We received the bids on October 4th and received 2 bids. And this project is for the replacement of the existing 3 boilers and also the HVAC equipment for the gym wing of Fort Hill. The funding for the project has been secured from 3 sources, from the state through the IEC's capital improvement program, from Allegany County, their contribution, and then the balance from Allegany County Public Schools. We received 2 bids, and I'm recommending the approval of the low bid from Carl Belt here in Cumberland in the amount of $4,689,000. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Is there a motion regarding the bid?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Mr. Marley's advice and the bid from Mr. Belt.
Motion by Mr. Farrell. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Frank. Any questions for Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley, could you explain, and I know you've kind of led us to, but maybe the public needs to understand how old those boilers are at Fort Hill and why we need to do this?
Sure. So we have 3 existing boilers at Fort Hill. 2 of them are original from the original school construction, so they're 87 years old. And they've been in continuous use since 1935. And of course, we're burning coal. But we've certainly got our money's worth out of them. And it's the equipment's getting to the point where it's really hard for us to keep it maintained and operating. The 3rd boiler was converted to natural gas during the renovation in 1991, and it's usually what they use on a morning like today when you just need to take the chill from the building. But it's very inefficient, and the same it's very old parts, and it's getting harder and harder to find parts for this old equipment. So we're looking at replacing those 3 boilers with new cast iron natural gas fired boilers. They'll be automated. What we expect is they'll run a lot less than the coal boilers, which once they start firing, they have to maintain that fire 24/7 to keep the heat up in the school. So along with that, the gym wing was not renovated completely like the rest of the school in 1991. So the existing heating and ventilation equipment remains in the gym from original construction. So when we take our old boilers away, we take the steam heat away. So we've got to come back and replace the HVAC systems for the gym wing. So it'll be both gyms, both locker rooms, weight room and wrestling room. So what's coming back obviously will be new and improved equipment, which will include air conditioning. So that's will be a bonus, and I think everybody will be glad to hear that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Marley? All those in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. McKenzie?
At this point, I would also, as part of this process, as Mr. Marley had indicated, for this bid to go forth, we will have to potentially dip into fund balance to fund this based upon some of the increases that have been projected. So what I would ask is for approval to move up to 1.3 million from the fund balance to cover the increase in those costs, while we potentially can fill in that gap with other funding sources, but up to 1.3 million from fund balance.
Motion to approve the movement of up to $1.3 million from the fund balance to cover the Fort Hill improvements.
Motion by Mrs. Fraley,
Second.
second by Dr. Bond. Any questions for Mr. McKenzie? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Thank you, Mr. Marley. Okay, next under new business, due to Election Day, we are asking for a motion to move the November 8th meeting to November 15th. Is there a motion regarding?
Motion to move the standing November meeting from November 8th to November 15th.
Motion by Mrs. Fraley, second by Mr. Farrell. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we also need a motion to vote to meet in executive session, November 15th, 2022.
So moved.
Dr. Bond, is there a second? Second by Ms. Frank. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. And at this time is time for our student member of the board update. Ms. Kleist, do you have anything for us?
So we recently were able to have our first student council meeting with all the student councils within the county, and we were able to bring that back in person, so it was really good to get that started again. And we are currently in the process of planning our November one, which should be taking place probably around mid-November. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. And any board member updates at this time? Ms. Frank?
Mr. Blank, Mr. Llewellyn, Ms. Fraley, and I had the pleasure last week of going to the Maryland Association of Boards of Education conference, which was almost entirely focused on the blueprint. So we were inundated with a ton of information, as you are. You know, on paper, things sound wonderful. It becomes a question for the future board to really work over the next several years trying to roll out a lot of these without us knowing exactly where the funding's coming from and more details. So I appreciate, Dr. Main, your overview. I would also like to say that because this is the last meeting before the election, that 3 of our board seats are up for election this year, and I would urge people to choose those individuals, not a voting block, individuals who they believe would best serve the system. I would urge everybody to read individuals' platforms because a lot can be seen on those platforms. Make sure that the information there is factual. I see a lot of critical race theory comments, and I can assure you, being on this board and having access to MSDE curriculum standards, critical race theory is not in Allegheny County public school system. It's not on the horizon. It's not looming. I fear that that's one of the scare tactics that's being used for some of the voters. The other thing I would say is that if a candidate is claiming to support all students and yet singles out the most fragile and marginalized of our students, I would urge you to think twice about whether that person would actually be working for the good of the students. So we have several candidates. We have 6 candidates. Take a look at everybody's platform, ask them questions. There are a couple forums coming up. You can hear them in person, but this is critically important. And at the forefront of every candidate's platform right now should be the blueprint. And so I urge everybody to go out and vote. Midterm elections traditionally don't get a high turnout. This is very important for this county because this is the majority of the board that could be replaced. Thank you.
Any other, Ms. Fraley?
I want to say at the MABE conference that our student member of the board was there and was able to be part of a panel discussion about giving kids input, because it really is about the students and what they see, and it was nice to see that they had different size counties up there, and many of our problems, if you want to call them our problems, are actually the entire state. And it was nice to see that the students could all get together and they really did have the same issues. And they had some great ideas about how to handle some of those issues. And I'm hopeful that for our county, we can bring some of that information back and help our students help themselves, right? Because they do have some great ideas about getting more involved. And one of the big things that we've talked about in here before is bullying and how to, and the mental health, especially coming back from COVID. I mean, you just have a lot of students that are struggling, and we need to help them. And I think our student board members have a lot to do with that. We also had a presentation that was actually done. Many of you know that my husband used to work in Cumberland in Allegany County, but now he's in West Virginia. But they had a presentation about psychiatric service dogs or therapy dogs. And I know that in South Penn we've had some where the dogs are helping the students even during the reading program, Read Across America. People brought in dogs for that. There's some great opportunities to create those connections. We were talking about creating connections and how we get students to want to come to school and how we get them to, you got to be in the school to be able to teach them. I think that's something we need to look into as well as these programs that we have. And I said last time I'm serving on the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports, which is this big long thing that really is about the wraparound services and bringing all different types of supports. It's not just the school system. It includes the health department. It includes the social services, and trying to work as a community to make that difference. And I'm hopeful that with me serving on that, I'm actually a subcommittee chair also for one of those, and being part of that. And those part of that presentation that's being put out by MSDE and part of those reports that are being put out, this community consortium has to put out a report by December 15th, I think it is. It's part of that. And so I'm hopeful that we can all be part of that and give our input, especially from a county who is not, we're more widespread. A lot of it, some of these supports, it's a lot easier to get when everybody's right there in a room, right in close proximity. And for us, we've got such a wide span of our county that it's hard to say that somebody that's out in Westernport needs to get some support from somebody in Cumberland. That's not so easy to do. They want to have something where people are within, I think it's a 45 minutes that you can get to them in 45 minutes. And so that's something that they're looking at doing. So I look forward to doing that. And I hope that we can continue to work with our students on the student board members, because again, I think they have the most input. So thank you.
Okay, at this time, can we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Dr. Bond. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Frank. All in favor? Thank you all. Have a good evening.